have to kill it, Commander.
An alien predator.
A stealer of souls.
Targets its next victim.
I could rip your soul from your body.
On an all-new Babylon 5.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the Grey Council.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. This is Scott with the Front Row Network, part of NPR Illinois Community Voices. We want to welcome you all to the Gray 17 podcast, and we are here for episode 2 of season 1, The Soul Hunter. We are going to be doing 2 different sections, as we always do. The first one is going to be with everyone, including our newbies who have just watched only, if they've not broken the rules already, this plus the previous 2 episodes, including The Gathering. And then we'll have some folks who have seen the entire show and who are not going to spoil anything, Kevin. And then we're going to stick around with those guys and basically answer every single question that the newbies have, but we can't give them an answer to them, but we can answer it once we kick them out. So as I mentioned, we are here for Soul Hunter. My name is Scott, and with me, as always, is...
I'm Justin.
I'm Kevin.
Jessi. Emily.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Mike.
I'm Nicole.
I'm John.
Excellent. One of our long-term fans, Blake, has a viral infection that he has to deal with. We'll have him back next week.
Hopefully Soul Hunters are not going for him right now.
I was going to say it's an infection that may turn him into an armored killing machine, but we're not to that episode yet.
Spoiler alert.
It's called Infection. We'll get there. But we do have with us a new person to the cast, which is Kevin. Kevin is a long-term fan of B5, so he'll be sticking with us for both sections. But Kevin, we want to welcome you to the show, and then I'll ask you what I ask everybody else. Who are you, and what do you want?
Well, I'm Kevin. As Scott mentioned, I'm a long-term fan of the show. I first came to it when I was in college. It was actually Blake that encouraged me to check it out, and I've been a big fan of it ever since. I am quite a sci-fi aficionado. There's quite a bit of different sci-fi that I've gotten into over the years, and I'm really looking forward to, and I've already done that, really seeing this through a new lens because of the newbies watching it. They're really making me look at different things that I haven't looked at too much before. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this whole series. This is going to be great.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right into Soul Hunter. First thing we're going to do is get first impressions from folks. What are your first impression on the episode itself? And let's go over to Emily first.
My first impression was it was actually kind of an interesting premise. Surprisingly, I really liked the episode because I feel like we got more information about Delenn. She's the character that I like starting with The Gathering. I feel like there's a lot about her and they're just going to slowly give us more information. I felt like this episode gave us more, and I was kind of excited about that.
I do like how Sinclair basically embodied the newbies at the end when he says $10 says she never finishes that sentence. Andrew, how about you?
I also really liked it. Kind of reminded me of like a classic Star Trek episode, like something takes over the Enterprise and Captain has to pretty much take over and do things himself, like despite everyone else's warnings.
We're 3 episodes in, including the pilot movie, and Sinclair has found a way to get himself within firing distance of something every single time. I keep remembering like the first couple seasons of TNG where Riker would always complain about Picard doing the away mission. And I'm thinking Sinclair has a death wish. He has to hop in front of a gun or a Star Fury or something every single week.
And I love in this one, he didn't even bother asking for help when he found Delenn and the Soul Hunter. He's like, I can handle this myself. I don't need to call Garibaldi or anybody else.
You're right. So actually, we're 3 episodes in, and he's put himself in danger 4 times in 3 episodes. I forgot he does the Star Fury, and then he goes after the Soul Hunter himself. As Garibaldi says, he's put him out of a job.
Doing quite the Captain Kirk impression.
Justin, how about you? First impressions?
First impressions, it was probably, I think, my favorite episode thus far. I think the Soul Hunter, or I think in Mbari, I wrote down Shock Tot, as she was calling him, is definitely a very, you kind of sway your visual of that character over the course of the episode, I think, and then even get a differing opinion of kind of that whole brotherhood towards the end, and very uncertain viewpoint of that brotherhood. I do think that the commander needs to go back to the space Chuck E. Cheese and practice his claw grab skills a little more. Overall, I thought it was actually pretty well done. We finally get an answer as to what happened to Dr. Kyle, which has been bothering me the whole episode he's been away. Yeah, I liked it.
And we also got Dr. Franklin for the first time, which we'll get into here when we talk about characters as well, too. Let's go to Jessi, first impressions.
About 25 minutes in, I turned it off to take a nap, and then turned it back on and found it much more enjoyable. Trying taking a nap. I'm struggling with the show because I need, which they gave us at the end, but I need more plot. I need not just separate episodes where something happens and it doesn't really relate to the last one. And so the second post-nap part was more, you start to see them build the plot, build the characters, build the foreseeing future things. And I like to watch shows that I can go, oh, that happened 3 episodes ago, and this is where we're bringing it back around. And that's where I saw a little bit more towards the end. And all jokes aside, I didn't hate it. I did have a moment today where I thought, oh, I have 5 more years of this, and I'm not sure what I got myself into. But I'm hopeful that the next couple episodes really dig in, and by season 2, we are in the middle of me being intrigued by the show.
Yeah, and I hear you. And that was one of the things I said to you all, and I'll say to the listeners too, who maybe join in on this show for the first time, it does speed up, I promise. And it does start connecting. I think, as we've kind of already discussed a little bit, season 1 is definitely a place where we start learning about the characters, learning about the worlds and the universe itself. I would say probably halfway through season 1, you're going to get what you asked for, Jessi, and then we'll be off to the races. But they got to kind of set the groundwork here. And
sure.
But I hear you. And I've said this before. I binge this show at least once, probably a year, but I usually start on season 2. Okay. So even me, I don't watch season 1 that much, except for a few select episodes, which will make themselves obvious as we go. But so I hear you. Mike, how about you?
So as a long time, somebody who's seen the whole series, I went into this week positively dreading watching this episode because I remembered the core premise of what a soul hunter is and what he does and kind of where it goes. I was actually very pleasantly surprised at watching this episode today that really the plot line is pretty I'm trying to think what the word I'm looking for here. It's got some nice layers to it, where there's the core premise of what the soul hunter does, but then you get into some nice kind of like religious differences and then philosophical type stuff. So overall, I ended up I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. And I think it's a very solid episode overall, even though it does lack some of my favorite characters. In the end, I barely noticed that they were absent from this episode because the rest of the plot kept me engaged. And who doesn't love the dramatic overperformance of William Shepherd?
Yeah, you're right. Jakar and Londo are not in this episode one bit.
Not at all.
John, how about you?
I also was a fan of it. I mean, unfortunately, Londo so far is my favorite character, so him not being in it was kind of a bummer. But, kind of to Mike's point, I don't know if they'll continue to explore it, if this is kind of one-off, but, the religious tones and the religious fanaticism aspect, it seemed like they were going into. I mean, you're talking about souls and sci-fi, and I was like, man, it's interesting to think. Okay, so does every species have a soul? Does every species believe it has a soul? Do they have like religion set up throughout? Is there going to be? I mean, anytime you have religion, you have conflict. So I'm like, oh man, that could be a real interesting case to go into and have religions clash. And then I thought, immediately I was like, oh, he only takes special souls. Okay, cool. So, I guess shady gambler doesn't sound like he made the cut. It's unfortunate. So, but I enjoyed it. There's a bunch more to talk about and focus on, but I was kind of hoping that'll be something they'll dive into even further.
I just want to add, that was one of the things about it that immediately, like, as soon as the episode ended, I found myself continuing to think about like the implications of kind of what the Soul Hunter's deal was and what the conflict was. So that's the hallmark of a good episode of sci-fi right there, because it got me thinking. So immediately I was like, oh, and I thought the new Doctor would play it up more, the science versus faith thing that, that does make for good sci-fi. And interestingly enough, I think was kind of done, maybe the best in Lost, which obviously has the Mira Furlan connection since she was in both shows, which I thought was also kind of funny and interesting. So while obviously not going to know until I have to watch all these episodes, it would be nice to know whether they dive into that more or this is some one-off and I'll just be left blue-balled by Babylon 5 and religion. So
I think it's safe to say that, as I kind of mentioned when we started this whole thing, when JMS had these ideas, he had two shows, a space station-based show that really dealt with characters and a universe show that dealt with civilizations and the rise and fall of worlds. So I think it's safe to say religion plays a big factor in a lot of that.
You get kind of a hint of Mbari religion, in that, to where almost like a very interesting form of reincarnation, the way that she kind of describes how every soul kind of goes into the big pool. And then from there, part of it goes into each new person. I'm like, okay, I kind of dig that reincarnation aspect of it. And then just kind of the way that the soul hunters view kind of the afterlife itself. It's definitely interesting.
Nicole, first impressions.
At first I was like, what in the hell is this episode? Like, what is happening? I was kind of like, what did I get myself into? But then as the episode went on, I actually was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I really like how we got a little bit more backstory of Delenn, like Emily was saying. I also thought we got a little bit more dynamic about Sinclair's history with the Mbari, because that is something I really want to explore a little bit more as well. Also, I got a little bit of like how they only take the special souls. So like, are the soul hunters elitists? Like, what's going on there kind of thing? What deems a soul worthy and special and what doesn't kind of. So I had a lot of questions after watching it, but overall, I thought the episode was good. I thought it was interesting. I do think it's funny how Sinclair just puts himself in the line of fire over and over again, but he is kind of a badass, so we'll give him that. But I kind of missed, like, I wanted a little, like, there was a little bit like no Londo, which, I didn't love, but like there wasn't a lot of Garibaldi, or like it was really a very much Delenn, Sinclair, and Soul Hunter, and then creepy Soul Hunter too. So there was like it was very focused on those characters. So with that being said, it kind of sucked that the others weren't as prevalent, but also I feel like there wouldn't have been a place for them in the show, if that makes sense, in this episode. So I thought it was done really well, the incorporating it and keeping it focused on the few people that really were the core of this story. So I liked it.
Yeah, it's a good thing, I think, that they have such a large cast, so that they're going to choose episodes where a couple of actors aren't going to be on the call sheet at all. And there's nothing wrong with that, other than, once in a while your favorite characters aren't going to be around. But I think this episode was driven by one, if not two, really good character actors that show up a lot in different series in the 90s. W. Morgan Shepherd and John Schneider both are Star Trek alums, along with some other stuff. And I really enjoy W. Morgan Shepherd especially. I thought this wasn't his best work of some of that guest star work, but I really enjoyed that they were cast in this.
So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the characters, since that's a good segue. And obviously, the main person in this episode is the Soul Hunter himself, and that's the first Soul Hunter we see, which, as you mentioned, is played by W. Morgan Shepherd, who just recently passed away, but in 2019. But if you don't know the name, you know the actor, because either of his voice or just his face, and you see him in so much. I mean, when I think of him, I think of him in the movie Gettysburg. He's the narrator, and he's also a general in that. He's the bad guy in Elvira, Mistress of whatever the heck that movie was back in the 80s. And he's in so much stuff. And then his son, Mark Shepherd, is absolutely an actor as well, too, best known for Supernatural, Doctor Who, and actually Front Row Connection. Jeremy Geckner, our editor-in-chief, got to moderate the panel with Mark Shepherd at St. Louis Fan Expo a few months ago, and he's a really cool dude. I got to talk to him for literally 2 seconds, but he's fun, and he's one of those guys who just doesn't give a damn. And he also talked to his dad, too, and talked about how much his dad loved acting. So it was a great little connection there as well, too. What do you guys think of, as we pointed out, our butthole friend, the Soul Hunter? And by the way, I'll throw this out there because it's going to be 4 years until we get to it. There's a made-for-TV movie that brings the Soul Hunters back, and it's frickin' Martin Sheen who's in that makeup.
No
Martin
way.
Sheen's got a butthole head.
Not President Bartlett.
So excited for that.
If you hit a
River
quarter,
of
does it
Souls.
give you a
River of
prize?
Souls. We'll get there in 4 years.
Listen, I'm not giving up on the fact that, especially in the early parts of the episode, they really highlighted those labias, and it looked like a vagina and not a butthole. Okay, I'm not just going to visual territory to the butthole crap.
Either way, it's something that probably shouldn't be on somebody's forehead.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a fan of vagina, so if it was on the forehead, I don't know. There's applications.
It looked like a cat butthole to me.
I have to agree with that assessment.
It looked nothing like a vagina. I don't know. Like, listen, maybe I haven't seen them all, but we've derailed. But just don't understand right now what's happening. It's fine. Let's move on.
We all can't live the high life, Jessi. And
We are way beyond the rim at this point.
Welcome to.
I'm quitting. This is only the 4th episode, and I've had enough.
I'm trying to come up with another good pun that goes along the lines of Narncore, but there's nothing for
This is what we get for recording after 10 o'clock.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm having a great time.
NPR is going to kick us off. They don't want anything to do with us.
I'm usually the one who gets yelled at on the other shows.
But it sounds like there's going to be some very controversial opinions in this podcast. I, for one, can't wait.
So the Soul Hunter, Morgan Shepherd, you guys have already talked about it a little bit in terms of the religious aspects. Justin, you talked about the reincarnation with the Minbari. We also talked about just souls in general. Is there anything else anybody wants to hit on in terms of some of the new things we've gotten from this episode and into this universe?
So there were a couple things that I think are really minor, but stood out to me because I was like, wait, what? So it seems like, does Babylon 5 have like a class system? Because when we saw, first of all, big ups to 3-card money still being a thing in every galaxy. But, when you look at them, they were wearing like rags and, it looked real. It wasn't the ambassador ring, that was for sure. And then, in that same vein, when the Soul Hunter was negotiating with the praying mantis Jabba the Hutt character. First of all, I wonder, so do you think that the humans tell the praying mantis guy that like, oh, well, your species on our planet is bull beep, beep? Like, do you think there's beef there? Because he's like, oh, you think you're hot shit? Like on our planet, not only do we not even worry about you, I'm stepping on you. And like, it's stuff like that I saw and I go, I wonder what that's about. And I wish they would dive into more stuff like that.
Well, honestly, I picked up to kind of follow where you were going, John. I picked up from the very first, when we first met Dr. Franklin, and he comes on board and they're like, oh yeah, hey, Dr. Kyle had to go back and work for the president. I don't remember if I get the words exactly right, but there's like too many aliens on Earth and there needs to be somebody there to kind of, who knows what they're about. So it's like, gasp, humans are xenophobic. I'm
Actually,
shocked.
it was the opposite, wasn't it?
Was
I think
it?
what he
Right.
actually said was that there are more and more aliens migrating to Earth.
Okay, maybe I misremembered
Which
that.
I thought was
Senator.
And
I apologize.
Kyle's a xenobiologist, so
Well, I think
Yeah.
they like you though, Justin. So again, we were talking about before in the last episode, are the humans the bad guys? And, we were talking about that dynamic with the president of America or the president of Earth. So that's how I read it too. And he basically was like, oh, he's going there because there's a lot of aliens. I took it to mean like, oh, he can use his specialty to help that. But the way he said it also made me think like, let's make Earth great again 2032 because there's too many aliens popping up and coming over. So I also took
So I wasn't the only person who kind of picked that up then. Okay.
You guys are definitely trying to make Earth Alliance into the Fourth Reich, and you're going to drag it kicking and screaming into that. But I have to agree with Mike on this.
You guys think the humans are bad guys. Why is that?
No idea. No idea.
What in recent history has made you think that human beings are inherently evil? Tell me more.
But I do have to agree with Mike. Just on the paper, script-wise, and this has nothing to do with backstory or anything else, Franklin flat out says Dr. Kyle had to go back to Earth to assist the president because of the influx of alien immigration, or not even immigration, but visiting. So let's not also forget that Dr. Kyle got to see Vorlon, so that very well could be a part of it as well too, because as he pointed out in the gathering, no one has seen a Vorlon, and now we have the two people who have both off the station. With go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll point out there's a little dig at the end between Sinclair and Franklin where, what was it? Franklin asked Sinclair if he had seen something special. And then they made some kind of flippant remark about like, oh, that kind of talk will get you sent off on a long vacation. And I immediately went, Dr. Kyle.
I thought the same thing.
Looked into the unknown and got sent off somewhere.
And Mike, that's a great point because I haven't caught that before. In all my times of rewatching this, I caught that for the first time. I think because I usually don't watch The Gathering, honestly. So after watching The Gathering only a few weeks ago, I absolutely got the same thing. It's like, yeah, if you start talking like that, you're going to be shipped off like Dr. Kyle.
kind of made me wonder if that was a deliberate thing or not. It's hard to say, but
if not, it definitely fits. So let's dive into our second major character and one who's going to be with us because he's, on the opening credits, and that is Dr. Franklin, who joins us here for the first time. You guys already talked about him a little bit, but what are your first impressions for the good doctor?
I like the other guy better. Yeah, he was fine. He didn't really have a whole lot. Then the parts he did, I could give or take, I guess. So I guess I'll leave it open-minded, wait to see what he brings. I think Nicole mentioned earlier, this was the episode focused on about 3 or 4 people, and he wasn't one of them. So
I like that.
He was all right.
Nicole, go ahead.
I liked him.
Great. Good talk. Thank you.
Insightful.
He gives me Julian Bashir vibes from DS9.
Okay, so Justin, Julian Bashir vibes. I would say that is the first impression I have is Dr. Kyle was the sage, wise old man, and we can absolutely tell as soon as Franklin steps off whatever he came off of, he's much more enthusiastic, much younger. We do know that he knows Sinclair. We don't know how he knows Sinclair, but he knows him because he said it's been a long time. And yeah, I think I do. What I do appreciate, and Mike hit on it too, is it's not Sinclair. Franklin is, he's a scientist. So he immediately starts saying this soul thing is bunk. But at the end of the day, he starts asking questions like, what did you see? So he definitely is somebody who wants to explore things that he doesn't understand, which being in a station with a whole bunch of different aliens, that works out too. I'm going to rewind just a bit because I just mentioned the station full of aliens. But John, you had mentioned the different hierarchies in the station with the 3-card Monty and everything else, but they didn't call it this yet, but it's not a spoiler. This is our first view of Down Below, which is an area of the station that is where the industrial pieces of the station are. Part of it's called Brown Sector, and you can read into that as you like. It's what would be brown down there. It's a part of the station like any major city is going to have an area where people get stuck. And so that's definitely something we saw here for the first time as well, too. And you're right. We also saw the alien sector again, and Garibaldi actually called it out as the alien sector, which is the area where those who do not breathe oxygen find themselves.
Scott, when you were saying that, I was like, it reminded me of like a seedy underbelly. Like where like the illegal stuff happens and like illegal trades and, you know, like things that aren't supposed to happen on the base. I feel like it happens in that area. Like it's like the deep underbelly of where like the crime or like, I mean, obviously somebody got stabbed down there. So, you know, it's like, I feel like it's the, you know, where people go when they're up to no good, if that makes sense. Yeah. It really gave me that vibe. Like, ooh, I wouldn't want to be down there.
Well, and Mike, I can't remember if you said this with everyone on the show or if you said this when we went into our spoiler section, but one thing you point out in The Gathering was that we didn't get a sense of scope of what the station really was. And we're starting to finally get that. Part of that is because we have a budget now, so we can start doing other sets. But we have to continue to remind ourselves that this is a 5-mile long station with a 250,000 people in it.
Yeah, which actually, I actually had some other remarks related to the opening sequence of the tiny Soul Hunter ship going to ram into the station, and apparently it was a grave threat when it looked like it should have just bounced off and not been an issue at all. There are a few like weird scale things in this episode. I think the other one was like where the second Soul Hunter just like points his finger at this 2D map and they're like, oh, it's that room. Like,
yeah, I think I think we're still definitely universe building. One thing that JMS actually, because I go back and look at the Usenets back from the 90s, and as we've mentioned for those who may have just joined us, J. Michael Straczynski, the showrunner, had a very active internet presence when this show was coming out in the early 90s or mid 90s, and that was actually a complaint that he got in one of his chat groups was that Soul Hunter ship looked pretty small and pretty not scary. And what was the deal with that? And he actually pointed out, it was never going to be a danger to the ship. Even Sinclair points out that if I don't catch this thing this time, just blow it up. But you're right. The size and scale is something that they need to work on some more. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. It's just, I pointed out previously that the actual station itself is so massive that it's quite honestly hard for the viewers to grasp. And it's obviously kind of hard for the writers to grasp too.
Yeah, agreed.
They should have just blown up the ship and then rolled credits. Done.
So, Justin, you said you have something to add about the down below and the victim?
Well, I thought actually one of the most powerful scenes, I think, to me in the episode was the, I guess, funeral for the stabbing victim. I know how on, I think it was the last episode, we all kind of hated on Ivanova quite a bit, myself included. But I thought this actually showed a lot more of a human side to her. Where she kind of gave the little bit from the stars we came to the stars we return, you know, kind of type benediction to someone she didn't even know, had really no reason to care about, but still kind of gave them a fond farewell to their final resting place. Mm-hmm. And I guess part of one thing that really makes a lot of sense now is when she's accused of being a pessimist and she says, I'm Russian. We understand these things.
I agree. And her line about being Russian. And one of the things I know she did get quite a bit of hate for the previous episode. And watching it, I just think of her as very similar to 7 of 9. So for other Trekkies who are familiar with 7 of 9 and Voyager. And so I'm kind of hoping she might have a similar arc where she starts out maybe kind of cold and unlikable, and, you know, you see more of her humanity as the series continues. And I thought it was also a pretty funny line too. Like, I'm Russian, of course I understand these things, you know.
You guys dogged Ivanova, and it's Ivanova. Just throwing it out there. I mentioned that not only in the fan base is she one of the, you know, liked characters, but for me, she's one of my favorite characters in the show too. And I think you're starting to see it. I think you're starting to see that she is very dry. But I love that conversation between Franklin and her. We learn a lot in that conversation. For one, we learn that obviously we're in space now, but we're advancing medically to where the general population lives to be at least 100, which obviously is a big change from where we are now. And we learn that Franklin's an optimist, or at least he is a philosophical guy, saying, you know, it seems like just as we get to the age that we start figuring stuff out, it's when we usually check out. And then we know that Ivanova is not an optimist. She's Russian, which also J. Michael Straczynski is Russian. So he definitely, you'll see this as you go. He endows Ivanova with a lot of himself. So you're going to see a lot of tiebacks to Russian culture and just sarcastic cynicism out of her, which I enjoy.
Yeah, I think they kind of introduced in her monologue at the end of that introductory episode, where she talks about her. Really, they kind of like unload with both barrels her backstory, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of get established the fact that she is the way that she is, not because she is a naturally cold-hearted person, but because she's probably not had a great life and has kind of sealed herself away in that kind of pessimism, right?
She absolutely has some childhood trauma. We know that for a fact.
Listen, I might be the only one on this island, but I still don't like her. She still gets on my nerves. I was not
the only one.
The Russian thing, I was like, all right, well, at least it's understandable now, but I still hate her. She's still a bitch. She's still so wooden and just so like every time I see her, I go, well, this sourpuss is back, so I can't wait for her to. And then she did the funeral thing, and I was like, man, you really could have stepped that up a lot. No, you don't know this guy. Like, I took it the opposite way, Justin. I was like, boy, I tell you what, that's a good line. But the way she delivered it, I've never been even more sad to be at a funeral than this one. Also, speaking of funerals, if we're a burial at like space, is it really cost effective and the best way to build like a pod and shoot that towards the sun? Because it feels like you just burned him up downstairs. Especially if they're in like I got the coal miner, or not coal miners, but the coal Titanic people with that whole down below stuff. I just feel like they would have done that a little differently, I think.
Like how other series utilize recyclers and then you just dump them in the recycler.
Yeah. I thought a little bit much for the 3-card money guy, but
I like to think that other alien races will eventually just, happen upon this floating coffin and open it up and be like, what the hell?
It's all going to get stuck in Epsilon 3, which is the planet. But for those who've been around a while, the planet's Epsilon 3. And I guess there's an Epsilon 3 ship, because she definitely says Epsilon 3, you're cleared for whatever. I was like, well, the planet's cleared to leave the station. Cool. Speaking of not knowing our universe yet as the writers, they're still figuring some stuff out.
Well, I did something I did want to bring up though, that opening scene. So first of all, still chef's kiss to the 90s graphics. But the actual like directing, like visuals. So when he was trying to keep up with the Soul Hunter ship, I got a real like Interstellar vibe when he was trying to like that shot was like super. That was actually really great. And I was like, man, now see if they do more like this, that's awesome. And for being in the 90s, it was really good. So I actually enjoyed that first part.
Thank you for name dropping my favorite show of all time. Favorite movie. Interstellar is amazing. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I love that movie.
No, I thought it was pretty decent.
Till the last half hour, sure. Yeah. No.
Don't even start. We've already done a podcast on Interstellar.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I noticed I wasn't invited, but anyway, it's fine.
Speaking also talking about characters, I said I think last episode, and I'm doubling down and tripling down. This Delenn, I don't trust her even a little bit. And this episode makes me think I called it right away, because she's shady as all get out. And this satire, however you said it, you know what I mean? What she's, who knows what's going on, or a little slip about, I got my eye on her. I don't trust it.
What is the Great Council? Is that the leadership of the Mbaris? And, especially when they were talking about this Soul Hunter's personal history, when he claimed to collect the soul of Dukat, which I thought, unless I'm saying, saying it completely
get
like
it. She stopped
wrong.
him.
Yeah. And he failed. And that's kind of what part drove him to the point where I'm just going to start taking the souls before they die. Type gig. And so it's a lot of personal history, I think, between Delenn and the Soul Hunter that kind of, it exposed a lot of Delenn. Like, it's even like he said at the very end, that's going to be interesting to find out what's this, why is somebody who used to sit on the Great Council now doing minor ambassador work out in the fringes of space. To be continued. ...
Well, there's so much there. I'm glad you guys hit on that. Obviously, the Soul Hunter saying that they're using Sinclair, and then finding out Delenn, whatever the Great Council is, she is a high-ranking official in the Minbari government, and whatever she is, she shouldn't be there.
And going back to the gathering, because there was that, I think it was in the gathering, the weird scene with the rings and the gravity, and she got all angry and was like, never mention the Great Council to me. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And there's been hints that this group, it almost was it in the last episode there, it felt like there was a hint of prophecy to this group, to the council. And based on the anger of her just even being like, it being brought up around her made me feel like there was a big falling out. There's some trust issues maybe. And she, she said she's just supposed to be an observer now and not really involved, but she kind of knows Sinclair already. And what was it? I had a note because it was when she gave him the little like data stick, USB drive, whatever it was. And she was like, oh, just say it fell from the sky. And I was like, are we throwing something back to like when he was on the front line and blacked out for 24 hours? Like, are we referencing something here?
I wrote all that stuff down. I was like, there's way too many correlations here with her, like throwing hints at him and sending ideas to him and giving tidbits to him, but also how she was like, we were right about you. Like, what the hell is that? Like, what does that mean?
Yes.
What were you right about? Like, there's something else going on there. And the fact that she's so high ranking, but she's got this minuscule role. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I really like want to like her, but also like, what is going on behind the scenes? Like, there's too much there.
Yeah.
Kevin, Mike, and I
mad and got demoted, but they still need to like keep her somewhat happy so she doesn't spill everything.
Are we talking about like Sinclair's a sleeper and she's the handler? I'm like, what kind of accusations are we throwing around here?
Yeah.
Hey, it could be possible.
Kevin, Mike, and I will go ahead and completely answer all the questions about Delenn just as soon as you all jump off the chat. So that'll be fine.
This is going to be the most annoying 5 years of my life.
Right.
And I thought my starter marriage was bad. This is going to be terrible.
Wow. That's fired.
This will be fun, at least. This will be fun.
Right.
There's a comment for the season 1 recap. What was better, Justin's starter marriage or season 1? Let's debate.
I still vote season 1, but that's just me.
No comment.
So before we start wrapping things up with any lingering questions you have, I did throw out to our Twitter family, which we're actually starting to grow here. So if you're on Twitter or Facebook, if you search Gray 17 Podcast, you can join the conversation. But I said that we were recording our episode for Soul Hunter, and I asked for some feedback, and we got some good stuff. So, for example, our friends over at Yum Yum Podcast, you can figure out why they call themselves that if you listen to their podcast. I do, and I know. It all hinges on if you think a Soul Hunter is a cool idea. We do. What really sells it is the powerhouse performance of W. Morgan Shepherd. Tim writes today, unfortunately, who's his handle is Super Tim 616. He says filler in the ultimate went nowhere. In reply to him, we had from Marcus Cole, it establishes the ambiguity of souls in the universe, and that will be picked up later on. We'll not talk anymore about that. But it is definitely more of a creature of the week episode, which, Andrew, you mentioned too, with Star Trek and how we have something that's a little bit more on that end too. The Funniest Frontier podcast did point out that the Soul Hunter looks like he has a butthole in the middle of his head. I could never take him seriously. So we're not alone. There are other people who question his head.
Keneally's on.
And I think this one I don't necessarily agree with Steve Winchell, but he says it is his favorite episode of season 1. Not sure I can get behind Steve on that one, but thanks for replying, Steve. So anything else, positives or negatives that you all want to throw out? And then also while we're doing that, what other lingering questions do you have that Kevin, Mike, and I can answer for you just as soon as we kick you off?
I just want to point one more thing out, and that is that this episode starts off with this insane overacting of the Soul Hunter by William Shepherd. And I just laughed super, super hard to myself when the second Soul Hunter comes in and does not do that at all. And he's just like, oh yeah, that dude's crazy.
He's just cuckoo. We don't really claim him anymore. In fact, we try to kill him.
We need to stop him from hurting himself. That's
I also really enjoyed when he takes out the guy in the med bay, and you can completely tell that that's a stunt double. Like, they don't even really do a good job at all of hiding that it's a stunt double. They did a better job in the fight scene with Sinclair, but not in med bay. Oh, it was bad.
I love when Franklin walks into med bay, and it's really quick, but you have the Soul Hunter who's awake and just staring at him the most creepy way possible through the window. And Franklin's
that was
like,
so creepy. Yeah, that's something I'm going to see in my dreams, and not a good way.
Reminded me of Michael Scott in The Office.
Do we have any idea how his little machine works, FYI? Because he hooked her up to it, and he was like, "Oh, I mean, I don't know if I got it all. But he was like, it all goes through your ankle," which I thought, okay, that's a choice. And then I don't know, he was like draining her blood, and then he was pointing at it, and then Franklin came in, immediately turns this thing on him, and the Soul Hunter gets got immediately. I'm like, right away, he's like dead. But he's been killing her for what seemed like hours. So I just didn't understand. And then was he in the ball? Did they take his soul?
They made a comment about that though, and something about I swear they made a comment about the Minbari anatomy, and like it would take forever for them to bleed out somehow.
He was trying to be at least, nice about murdering her. He said, I don't want your soul to be damaged, so let's take this slow. And then Sinclair's like, screw it. I'm just going to suck your soul out. Have a nice day. The end.
The Minbari have to be sturdy because she's over there at the end crushing glass soul balls with her bare hands. Somebody get that woman a hammer.
And we go to end credits going, click. Speaking of ASMR, we get that at the end credits. The end credits were always like, click.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was just releasing all those souls like, bye.
So JMS actually, again, back in 1994, got the same question about the blood. And so his response was, why drain her blood? ? Why the hell not? ? In some countries, that was used as a means of execution. Bleeding was also used, in theory, to heal. Okay, let's say he used poison. Why use poison? ? You probably would have asked. Oh, it was the old poison gag, and they find the convenient antidote. There's no difference. So in other words, JMS got pissy when somebody asked that question. It was great.
I guess the only question that I have kind of that is left unresolved, and I don't know, may forever be left unresolved, is what did Delenn plan that startled the Soul Healer so much? Like there's that one comment where I saw what you were planning. I saw what you wanted, what you were planning to do, when he was viewing the part of her soul in that, and it really messed him up. So it's like, that's a whole nother thing of what are we going to see from the Minbari later on?
It's like, are you seriously going to do that?
Yeah.
You're doing what?
It just added to the whole, like, okay, what is going on with her? What's she up to? Like, what is this leading to? Like, there's just something underlying with her that I think is going to explode.
Well, I'm sure we can talk about that in Beyond the Rim.
I've never hated you more than I do right now.
Yeah, I was going to say,
the amount of times that I hear you say that makes me want to punch through my computer screen.
See, this is the best part, because you all are going to hate me so much, and you're even going to hate download these, because 5 years from now or whatever it is, you're going to listen to them all again and go, I hate you, but I'm going to listen to it again because I need to know the answers. Even though I know them now, I'm going to need to know the answers. My positive and negative is, it was really, really distracting when Delenn's half her skull was hanging off her face because they didn't glue it down when she was talking to Sinclair. Did anyone else notice that?
No.
Oh, was that when her ears were lower and it seemed off?
Well, her ears are always lower, but she's got the bonehead, right? And on one side of her face, it's glued in and it's completely fine. But on the other side, it is absolutely hanging off.
Oh, no.
And it's probably, again, this thing was aired on standard def television over the air. It's fine. No one's ever going to see it. Don't worry about it. I'm watching on high def, my big ass screen. And I'm just like, her bone is hanging off her head. And it's really, really distracting me.
I guess my lingering question is, what were they right about when they said we were right about you? What were you right about, Delenn, about Sinclair? That's what I want to know, which I know you can't answer right now, but you probably will after.
Oh, I absolutely will, as soon as we kick you all off.
It's a big old sucker. No.
I was right. You're the crazy guy who always gets in front of the guns and jumps out in space and whatever.
Oh, speaking of guns, I thought there was supposed to be a gun-free zone, and towards the end, everybody had guns. The Soul Hunter had a gun. All the crew had everybody had guns.
Okay, that was another note that I wrote down. So at the end, rewinding to the fact that the Soul Hunters are responsible for judging who is worthy of preserving and who is not, and then he just straight up takes a shot at Sinclair at the end. Like,
you're not worthy. You're done.
Well, he said at all costs he's going to get her soul, so that's probably why.
Just that she's more important than he is, or how bad would you feel if the Soul Hunter shows up and he's like, I'm not here for you?
Well, ask the 3-card Monte family, because that's literally what happened. He showed up, that guy died, and he was like,
oh crap, I'm almost right.
Well, he opened his eyes. Here it comes. And then nothing. That poor guy.
And then he got spit out the thing like a big old toilet.
Like a brown sucker.
On that note, we'll go ahead and wrap out our conversation of Soul Hunter here for the newbies. Just a reminder, we are going to end here for the general conversation. We're going to roll the credits, and then we're going to come right back and go beyond the rim with Kevin, Mike, and myself. And we're going to answer every single question these guys have after they've gone, just to frustrate them some more. Until next week when we watch Born to the Purple, unless you stay around for Beyond the Rim, I'm Scott, and with me has been...
I'm Justin.
Kevin.
Jessi.
Emily.
Mike.
John.
Andrew.
And Nicole.
And we will see you... We end our Twilight Zone podcast because it's a TV show with On the Couch. So I will say we will see you on the couch.
Balls.
Thank you for listening to Gray 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to this podcast and links to our social media accounts at anchor.fm/Gray17podcast. We want to hear from you, so please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Gray 17 is a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You can find all the Front Row shows at thefrontrownetwork.com. Gray 17 is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All audio clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing theme was by Sakar Bala and is available from Bixabay.
And what's out there?
The rim,
And beyond that?
the truth.
This is Beyond the Rim, where Kevin, Mike, and I are going to talk about all the questions and answer all the questions that our newbies had now that they're gone. So if you did not listen to me and you stayed after the credits, then you have not watched the entire B5 5 seasons, or you just don't want to be spoiled, leave now. If not, we'll go ahead and get going with, I think the first conversation we'll have, guys, because it was the main crux of the episode, aside from the Soul Hunter, is Delenn and Sinclair. And our newbies definitely hit on it a little bit, with the Soul Hunter pointing out that Sinclair is being used, that Delenn is now, we know, Satai Delenn, and all that good stuff. So where do we want to go from here?
Well, they asked about, what the deal is with Delenn's plan, and why did that offend the Soul Hunter so much? And of course, they're probably referring to capturing Sinclair for the 24 hours, and he doesn't know what that was all about. The fact that he's going to eventually be leaving the time frame and becoming Valen is certainly part of that too. But I don't think that's what they're referring to. I think they're just referring to using him, bringing him into the station, making him the commander. And because what else is behind that 24-hour period other than just he can't remember?
Yeah, well, and it's a little interesting right now. The whole Sinclair is Valen thing is absolutely not what they're talking about, because at this point, Sinclair is not going to be Valen. We're still on Babylon 5/Babylon Prime plan, which I kind of mentioned a little bit in the Gathering episode we did. And that is the original plan that JMS had before, unfortunately, Michael O'Hare had to leave at the end of season 1, which we'll get to, was Delenn was going to originally be a male, and then she was going to transition to a female, because not that Sinclair is Valen, but Sinclair is the chosen one who is going to merge the Minbari and human species together, and therefore they have to have a child. At this point, what the Soul Hunter is referring to, because I'm just assuming this based on this, is that JMS has not changed the plan yet, because Michael O'Hare hasn't left yet or isn't planning to leave yet, is she is going to change herself. Now, of course, it's a little different since we didn't have the makeup and all that good stuff in the Gathering. It still fits, because you can definitely play with the whole, you're going to change into a hybrid, which is what she's going to do at the end of season 1. But I absolutely don't think that's what he was referring to, because I don't think that was the plan at this point. And also in terms of the 24 hours, we also know, because of several episodes coming up in season 1, that the Grey Council is on that ship that Sinclair tries to ram. Delenn is at that point running the war because she was second to Ducat. And when they bring Sinclair in, they use the Triforce. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it looks like Triforce. And they find out that Sinclair has a Minbari soul. So that's what Delenn knows.
My initial takeaway was, that he was referring to something in the future that she was yet to do. And so, I mean, I'm kind of with you. Like, my initial thought was that it had to do with her transitioning into becoming a hybrid. I mean, you're very well correct. It probably is not what they had originally intended, but it fits well enough. And that is like the place that my mind went as well when that line was dropped.
Kevin, you do make a good point, though. And the fact that they're using him as well is, we know that the reason why Sinclair is there is because the Minbari wanted him there. They said that he is the one we want in charge of the station, because they want to keep a close eye on him. Because, again, depending on what part of the season we're in, he is either the chosen one or he is potentially Valen. And in that case, we want to keep a close eye on him.
I was interested that the newbies really hadn't caught on to the caste system and how religious and spiritual the Minbari are. They really didn't latch onto that much. They're still really on the Earth Force being pretty draconian, which
when we get to season 2 and 3, they're gonna be like, we were right. We were right.
They will, for sure.
I think, to be fair, I feel like the stuff with Earth, they have telegraphed a little bit better than they have the Minbari at this point. I think they've mentioned the caste system, but I'm actually surprised at this point in the show how little we actually know about the Minbari. I feel like we know more about the Centauri and the Narn than we do the Minbari.
And we're going to know a lot more about the Centauri next episode with Born to the Purple, because it's a Londo-centric episode that also tells us more about Centauri culture, like how many wives they have and so forth and so on. But yeah, and you're right. With the Minbari, we haven't learned much yet. And I continue to have to remind myself what I know about the Minbari is not what these guys know. For example, we did hint at the whole soul piece and the fact that Delenn says if a soul is stolen, we are diminished. What we do know later on down the road is the Minbari population is dying off, and the Minbari believe the reason why it's dying off is because they're losing souls. So they're not reincarnating, and therefore they are dwindling as a population, which is very concerning to them, which is another reason why they're watching Sinclair, because they believe he's the one who can fix that. So we get the first hints of that, even though we don't go into it too much. I think that's another one of those things I love about this show is once you learn about more about the Minbari's philosophy on reincarnation and the fact that they are a dying race, you start going back and watching and saying, oh, they mentioned that in episode 2 because she said we are diminished every time a soul is stolen and so forth and so on. So I think that's a nice little line that they drop early that will carry on. So let's go ahead, and we mentioned Earth, and these guys love bashing on Earth. And Mike, I completely agree. That is not what Franklin was saying.
No.
when he said Kyle went back to Earth, but whatever. So let's talk a little bit more about Earth and why there are an influx of aliens and what is going to happen because there's an influx of aliens.
Later on, Earth is going to become increasingly xenophobic, and they're going to start expelling or imprisoning, aliens, and just becoming more and more draconian than they are now. But that hasn't happened at all yet because the presidency is still under somebody fairly decent at this point.
Yeah, I think this is again setting that stage where we know the vice president with too many chins, and he does not like the idea of muddying the waters of all these aliens, whereas in the president, on the other hand, is okay with it. And that's why I think that's what they're kind of hinting at here with Kyle going back is the current President Santiago, is okay with this and wants to expand the reach of Earth and expand the connections it has with alien civilizations, whereas in Vice President Clark obviously does not. And that's what's going to lead us to the assassination of Santiago at the end of this season. And you're right, the bigotry definitely comes out. And we'll start seeing that, I think, with I think War Prayer is when we'll start seeing that as well, too, on Earth.
That is interesting, because, I mean, I am not remembering everything that I've seen from the first go-around. I know that Earth becomes very draconian. I know that they fall back into conflict with Mars. I guess the more xenophobic storyline isn't surprising, but I had kind of forgotten about it. And so this is interesting that it is kind of telegraphing that it's the setup for what's to come.
Yeah, we start really seeing that. I mean, there's a little bit trickle to here and there, but really in the later seasons, we see that, especially when right before we start getting the station having to declare itself independent, there's a lot of xenophobia and bigotry. And we see, like, there's a couple episodes where we get the ISN reporters and we see that they transition to where they're talking about how there is a problem in the universe and it's not humans and all that good stuff. So I think that's definitely something that pops in there. But you are right, though, too, Mike. It's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece is just the authoritarian nature of what President Clark's going to bring starting in season 2 when he takes office, which is going to be a real good conversation sitting here in 2022 when we get to President Clark. I'm looking forward to those conversations with our guys. I think John already said, "Make America Great Again 2330" or whatever he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. President Clark's going to be an interesting conversation piece. So, of course, Soul Hunters will be back. We have a couple of different times they're mentioned. The next time actually is going to be when we see what happens to Dukat, because Dukat arrives in his warship with their gun ports open, which is a Minbari sign of peace. Like, our gun ports are open, like our hands are up. And Dukat sees the Soul Hunter ships arrive and he realizes, oh God, somebody's going to die, which means this is not going to go well. And then, of course, the other time we see the Soul Hunters is when the amazing thespian that is Martin Sheen puts on the butthole head for River of Souls, which is going to be one of our TV movies that will hit, I think, at the end of season 4. It happens in the middle of season 4, but I really think those TV movies kind of don't need to be watched in order of the timeline. So I think what we'll do, and we'll have 2 years to figure this out, but I think we'll watch those after season 4 when they were actually produced. Is there anything else I'm missing in terms of lingering questions the newbies had, or anything that popped up in this episode that's a good Easter egg to talk about?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm reviewing my notes and I feel like we've touched on a lot of the fact that by and large, this functions as a standalone episode with a really interesting layered kind of, I don't want to say Star Trek in, but it's a plot that's reminiscent of a standalone Star Trek episode. It brings up some interesting philosophy question, for you to go ponder, but it does primarily leave a little hint about Earth, a little hint about this, a little hint about that. It lays it really thick about the fact that Delenn has, again, there's more going on with her character and her role in the Minbari government, and the role of her role in things to come. And I feel like that's kind of it. That's really those are the things that I jotted down as like the standouts.
I was remembering the Star Fury scene at the very beginning of the episode, just thinking how much more I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the series, really paying a lot more attention to the physics aspect of Babylon 5. I really haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that because I've always seen it as a little bit lesser when, other series have done stuff with the models, but I don't think I'm going to see it that way this time around.
Yeah, I think obviously, as I mentioned, this was the first episode out of the gate, even though it's episode number 2. So they're definitely learning when the comes to their models and everything. We've already kind of seen some more fun stuff with the jumpgate and the Star Fury. So I'm looking forward to it too. It is unfortunate that even though HBO Max is streaming these and they've cleaned up the original prints, we're still dealing with the lower res CGI. So you look at it's letterboxed, or not letterboxed, but whatever, pillar boxed. So we're not going to get the high def view of these things, but it does look at least better than The Gathering. And I think it's going to get much better. I mean, of course, when we start getting into space battles with both the Shadows and with the Earth Alliance in season 4, it gets really good. So I like seeing the build up here.
I was saying, to be honest, it's interesting now that you've pointed out that this episode was actually the first one in the production shoot. I actually feel like the CGI in this one, as I was watching it, I kind of mentally took note of like, man, that does not look great. And I mean, I think it looks worse than even episode 1. Not on the firing line.
I agree with you, because like in Midnight on the Firing Line, when we see the attack on the colony, the Narn ships and everything else, they're still a little janky, but
they look better.
And
there's a longer sequence where, is it Garibaldi goes out and fights the pirates too.
Yes.
Obviously it doesn't look great, but for the 90s it looks decent, and it notably looks better than what we saw in this episode. So.
Well, and I think we're seeing that, and we're going to see that throughout season 1, particularly, is JMS and the team is starting to get their feet wet and starting to realize that what they can accomplish, both with CGI, but also with the storytelling too. I mean, JMS put this out in his Usenet feed before the episode first aired, and he said, well, I just saw a cut of the episode that's going to air second, the one guest starring Morgan Shepard. Oh man, on the question of did you learn anything from the pilot, the thing moves like a sumbitch. It's a very unusual, very creepy episode in many ways, and filled with character stuff and a good bit of background about some of our characters rendering in active ways. I'm really dying to see what people think of this one when it airs. It manages to take what would normally be considered a science fantasy issue and deal from a science fiction perspective without compromising on the letter of it at all. It's a very, very strong episode. Obviously he's talking himself up because it's his own show, but I think he's starting to realize that too, is, he's learning. And one thing I caught a lot in his autobiography, which again is Becoming Superman. I recommend people check it out. It's a really good one for not just Babylon 5, but he points out that he was scared completely when he was dealing with The Gathering, because he had never run a show before. He was just a writer. So having to executive produce a show, he was lost during The Gathering, but he really started getting his feet wet and understanding how this goes starting now. So I think we're going to see that too.
I mean, I just want to point out again, I think this was really a surprisingly good episode. And, it's one where the core premise of the sci-fi conflict of soul hunters and what they are and what they do and what that means it's one that gets you thinking. It's one that makes you wonder a little bit. I really dug it. So
I've said this many times, and I'm sure I'll say it again. Usually when I binge this show, I watch about 3 episodes in season 1, and then I dive into season 2. So I don't watch Soul Hunter that much, and so I was expecting not good things. And I agree. I think it's a solid episode. I obviously think that Babylon 5 gets much better, but I'm pleasantly surprised. Thanks, everybody. We'll go ahead and end it here, and we will be back next week when we talk a whole lot about Londo, and I'm sure in Beyond the Rim, we're going to talk a whole lot about what happens to Londo, because Mike, as you said, and I think I agree with you, I know I agree with you, Londo is the main character of this show. And so whenever we get a Londo episode, I'm sure this section of the podcast is going to be a lot of talking about Londo past, present, and future. So I'm looking forward to that as well, too. So until next time, I'm Scott, and with me has been
Kevin
and Mike.
And you can find us at anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast. That's also where you can find our social media and about 9 different ways you can subscribe to this podcast. And please, 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 whether you like us or not, give us a review, give us a subscription. If it's a hate review, that's fine. Still helps the algorithm. Give me your hate. It's fine. I appreciate it. Until next time, we will see you here Beyond the Rim and in normal space. Thanks for checking us out.
Sito Richo.
Dude, that chanting, I was like, what in the F is that?
Honestly, I thought I was watching a Gore music video there
for
a second.